everybody, welcome to EIS Live. By the way, if you're not familiar with EI Solutions, we are a counseling and coaching company that really focuses on helping people become their genuine selves and helping that process to translate into every area of your lives. And who doesn't want to become their genuine selves, right? We struggle in relationships, we struggle in business, we struggle all over the place in our lives, and sometimes we don't even know that why we're struggling, and we can really help you to navigate down that pathway to a more healthier emotional life. Why we're here and doing these lives is really to bring you testimonies of people that are involved in that process and have achieved victory in that process. And also our guests include some people that are authors, counselors, other professionals in different fields that have something to lend into this journey that we're talking about. So with that, today I have a great couple I've been working with for a period of time that have engaged in the process in a way that's basically taken them from surviving to thriving. It's a little phrase that we kick around all the time. But as you hear these testimonies, I'm sure that you can relate to areas of our lives where we're just kind of getting by and that we're not really thriving in our lives in the areas of relationships, marriage, business, or anything. And we wonder why. And so I want you to see that it's possible by demonstrating these testimonies that, you can get in a process that can achieve that and help you to get on a new pathway of really what boils down to doing the work. And, we're not going to get better unless we're doing some work. If you haven't noticed, we don't get better in our lives and become that best version of ourselves that most people would say that they want to become. By osmosis, just because we want to. It doesn't happen that way. It happens because we do the work. So before I introduce them, I want to bring in my co-host today, Vanessa. I'm sure you know Vanessa by now, our media czar. She just turned 21, so we can welcome her and give her a happy birthday.
Hi, Bill.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Finally legal.
All the way up to that big 21. Yeah, that was about 4 decades ago for me, 4.5 decades. So a little bit of a difference in age there, but thanks for just being here and being such a great big part of this.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Did you get everything you wanted for your birthday?
And more. And I think my biggest gift is knowing that I'm actually, and I don't mean this to sound like cliche or anything, but really I just did a lot of reflecting on the past year, and where I am from a year ago, just on the work I've been doing with you has just been, I can't even put words to it. And I'm just so grateful that I've been able to do the work and figure some stuff out. And there's a lot more to do, but I'm really excited. And just to see that transformation over the year makes me really excited for what's to come.
That's awesome. And you just graduated college too.
Yes. So I just feel like I'm starting this whole new chapter. It's definitely, it's really cool.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
A lot of hard work put in there for sure. Well, yeah, I've shared too is that, I posted a little picture of my car in San Clemente on Instagram before.
Making everyone jealous with your selfies and all these pictures.
Well, it's funny. That's parked like just almost right outside the door of my dentist that I went to.
I saw, yeah.
The first time around when I was a career drunkard. So I always experience God's full cycle redemption in my life, every time I just wake up here in San Clemente. So it's really awesome.
Yeah.
So that's what I was doing when I was 21. I was here getting drunk and being a professional drunkard. So anyway, enough of that. So I want to introduce Tyler and Melanie. We were just chatting before, and I think we've had them on like 3 times, in this pathway of their journey of, really transformation and moving from that surviving to thriving mode. So let's introduce Tyler and Melanie. Yay! Here they are. Applause machine or something that makes applause sounds when people come on.
That's okay. Hello.
How are you?
Really good, really good. I know we've been chatting since last night and even today, and I'm just so grateful that you're here, willing to do this and to, really speak into people's lives. And I know when we're going through this stuff ourselves, we don't necessarily feel like we're, kind of qualified to tell other people about it, because we're not really telling people how to do it. It's just sharing our story, like we mentioned a few minutes ago. And what really qualifies us is our brokenness. Not the fact that we're, how well we're doing the process or anything like that. It's like the healing is in the pain, the victories in our willingness to face our brokenness and things of that nature. So it's kind of like that, when we look at it from that perspective, everybody's broken. So everybody can relate. Everybody who listens to our stories can actually relate. I remember when I first started sharing my story, which is, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And, I used to get tired of it. I was like, why do people want to keep listening to my story? Well, they don't. It's just different people all the time. So all that to say, thanks for, being willing to share. And you're going to really impact a lot of people's lives today. I'm sure about it. So why don't we just start off by talking a little bit about your lives before you got involved with me, which I think might have been me or Persona U when you guys started coming around. I don't think it was quite EIS yet.
No, well, first of all, thank you so much for giving us the honor to be here today.
Absolutely.
And as you just said earlier, like, am I really qualified to do this? I'm not sure, but I do trust you. Yes, no, it wasn't EIS Solutions yet. EI Solutions yet. It was with you.
Yeah, so we met here in Sag Harbor, where I grew up, a small town on the East End. Melanie came here as an au pair.
Which is a live-in nanny. Not everyone knows what that means.
Yeah, came here from Germany for a year. So we started dating early in that time frame, and then she decided to go back to Germany for 5 years. Then I finally convinced her to move here. But prior to that, growing up in a small town with parents that had lots of issues, I guess you could say, really set me up for a lot of brokenness, as you mentioned. But really weird how your mind kind of designs trauma and hides it on you, so you don't even realize that your experience may have been traumatic. So just kind of wandering through life, not knowing all of that was there. When we first started dating, the beginnings of it were a lot of fun. But then when we transitioned into having a distance relationship between New York and Germany, with a 6-hour time difference between, and barely ever being able to be in person. We only had Skype. There was no FaceTime. There was no voice over internet, so we couldn't really call each other very often. So there's a lot of challenges, and with those challenges came triggers that we would trigger each other, and we get into these crazy World War fights over Skype. And so, just not knowing where these things were coming from was very confusing. Even to the point when she moved here after 5 years, we're like, okay, this is going to be perfect now. You're here. We're going to live together. All of these fights and all of these problems will just magically disappear. And
they didn't. They got worse.
A month into it, I kind of looked back and like, wait, something's really wrong. It got worse. Like the fights got even more intense and loud and crazy. So, we knew we loved each other, but we're like, why the heck is this happening? What is going on here? And I think, we're kind of like grown up, and and society kind of teaches you like, what is wrong with you? But when we started understanding trauma and working with you, thank God, it's more, what's happened to you, and it's okay because it happens to 95 to 99% of everyone else. You just need a professional to, help guide you through it. So yeah, that's kind of where we came from and how we got together.
Yes, to back up for a moment. So as you mentioned, I'm originally born and raised Germany. And, you know, I grew up with a working father, a stay-home mom, pretty normal family life. We would have dinner together almost every day. And it was like we would go on vacations and all these things. So I always thought I just had a wonderful childhood. I was never aware of what had happened to me. I just suppressed it so much. I just didn't even realize it happened to me. I just forgot. And very often Tyler would share some fun stories of his childhood. And he's like, what was it like for you? And I'm like, I don't remember. I don't know why. It's almost like someone, like, I don't know, flashed me like in that movie with Will Smith. And I just, Man in Black. And I just forgot. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I still knew stuff, but not, I had forgotten quite a lot. And so, yes, then I came here to the United States as an, within an exchange program. And then I went back to Germany to get my education done there. And I just wasn't ready. I mean, when we met, I was 19 years old. And when he asked me if I wanted to stay, I was like, no, I'm 19. Like, we've been dating for not even a year. I'm not just moving, which... yes, now to fast forward. And then I moved here around 3.5 weeks before we got married, which is, looking back, crazy enough. And then we got married. And then first I was just very homesick. I fell into a depression, and we always excused it with like, oh, she needs more time. She's just homesick. She will get over this. This is just a phase. And it was another phase and another phase. And sometimes, all you moms, I love you, you're all amazing. But sometimes when some of my mom friends share stories about their kids with me, they're like, oh, it's just a phase, right? And I just had all these phases. I went from one phase to another, to another, to another. And funny enough, I think we had 1 or 2 sessions as a gift from his mom's neighbor, who's a therapist. As a early pre-wedding gift, and she literally told us not to get married, and we were like, what does she know? We were just like, what does she know? She has no idea. We love each other so much, and love was, as I mentioned, never a question. Unfortunately, those phases just wouldn't end. And then it was actually our mentors, that had, I think, picked up on the body language, because based on our social media appearance and based on how we just tried to fake it out there in society, we seemed so happy. And we even had a few people reach out to us after we got married, after a 5-year distance relationship, saying, you guys are just, seeing your story makes me believe in love again. And we were so hyped up on that. And that just first gave us almost a fake, how would you word it?
Like a fake sense of accomplishment. Like we didn't accomplish anything. It's
right.
This fake persona that you put out on social media. It wasn't legit.
Yes. And so eventually we got called out, so to say, like, hey, how are you really doing? And I guess I just had a moment of just letting down my guard, and I just said, not great. But once again, I thought all it was being homesick, not being near my family, not being near anything I always knew from my entire life. I mean, a lot of people move for opportunity, and no matter why you make such a big change in life, it's still a change you have to adjust to. But eventually, we didn't realize, but eventually it just got so bad that, like, because of his past drama, his behavior would trigger me and vice versa. And it just got to the point where we didn't officially say it out loud to each other, like, hey, I think we should get a divorce. But internally, we were preparing for that. I was preparing to just be like, maybe that wasn't it. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe one out of many of failed marriages, and it's okay. I started to making excuses for it. So yes.
Before we go any further, I wanted to you said you got triggered by those things. And last time we talked about, like back then, you really didn't know you were being triggered. You just knew that it wasn't right, right?
Yes, he just really got me angry, to say it in a really nice way.
So yeah, I mean, that's moving ahead in your story and understanding the trauma, like you mentioned, and gaining that understanding. You start to understand, and I mean, that's half the battle. Is like, wait a minute, this is a trigger. So that means there's something behind this that we can investigate, take a look at, change, whatever. But if you're just going through phases, like you said, and we're just kind of rolling through life based on what life is kind of throwing at me. We're purely reactionary. We're not learning how to respond. We're not learning anything. So it sounds like you were really embroiled in that kind of a lifestyle at that point.
Yeah, 100%. It was, just being very unself-aware. So the moment that we got connected to you and went through the crazy test, and then you came back with the temperaments, I'll never forget. It was like clear as day. We're having our second only session ever with you. And you're like, well, maybe tell me about a recent argument you had. And we're like, okay, well, that's easy. It was about 20 minutes ago. So yeah, let's just tell him about that one. And I started explaining it, or we started explaining it. And you're like, okay, let me stop you right there. And Bill, you're like, based on your temperament, you probably got upset and closed down and you wanted to walk away. And then you probably did. And then Melanie, once he left the room, you probably felt this, this, and this. And you were literally spot on, completely spot on. So that was like the biggest kind of slap in the face of, all right, what the heck is going on here? We both really need to understand temperament. And it's amazing how powerful that tool is. Mm. I mean, I think about it all the time. It would have taken you or anyone years to understand our relational dynamics and what triggers us and how we react to situations. Just like that woman that gave us a session and she told me I should go on antidepressants and she told us we shouldn't get married. No, she just didn't have temperament to understand what triggers we were both stepping on, pushing in each other, whatever you want to call it.
And she wasn't necessarily wrong with don't get married, right? We were just like, had no choice to postpone it. So we were just telling ourselves, no way, she's wrong. She doesn't know what she's doing. To a certain extent, like when it came to that recommendation, she wasn't wrong. Which is at that point, we're kind of tied to our options because it's not like I had citizenship and I just had this option to say like, okay, fine, we'll move it till next year and we just work on our issues in between.
Yeah.
I think the difference though, that, that's why we really, most of the time, never tell people what to do. We tell them what's going on. Like Tyler, like you said, with the insight that we have with the test, which is a great tool, of course. I mean, it does give us 6 months to a year ahead of, and then not jumping to when we see the mess, we're not going to say, well, gee whiz, you shouldn't get married, which is going to push you away most of the time. But if we tell you something that is true, mm-hmm. It establishes credibility and like, wow, we should listen to this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And the only reason why I was even open to, seeing you and working with you was like, I just thought he was so wrong, right? Because like his behavior, his words, his acting would then get me so upset. Again, now I know he was triggering me and he wasn't aware that what his behavior or his acting were triggers for me. So I was like, oh, sure, I'll have Bill tell him what's wrong with him. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Yeah, fast forward, it wasn't just him or mostly him.
Yeah.
Well, that's always the way. And that's, of course, why we split you up after that. Otherwise, we just have this going on. If he would just stop doing that, I'd be okay. And if she would stop doing that, I'd be okay. So at that point, we split everybody up for that purpose so that you can learn how to take responsibility for yourself and, why you're in the condition that you're in. You can start to see what's broken within yourself and all of that. Otherwise, it's just kind of futile because you're always just, again, looking at the other person. And that's how we generally think. If they would just do this better and stop doing the other things, then I would be okay and then everything would be fine. And we're always trying to get to that place of being fine, right?
Yeah.
We just want to be fine all the time.
Yeah.
And live in la la land and just keep moving forward, moving from phase to phase.
Exactly.
So, okay, so moving forward in the process then, because again, you guys have remained in the process. And of course, you didn't know what the process, really comprised of in the very beginning and what that was going to look like. But maybe we can move a little further ahead into identifying some of that trauma for both of you as we kind of did move down those individual journeys.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever can go first, but I wanted to just throw this out because I know, Melanie, with you, like, backing up just a little bit, you said something like, when Tyler asked, like, well, what about your childhood and stuff like that? And you kind of drew a blank. And when we got to that place in our discussions, I remember that too. There was a certain age that you said you couldn't remember past. And whenever I hear that, of course, that's a pretty sure sign that there's trauma in there. And that, the person has blocked their childhood experiences basically up to that point. They might remember some benign things, some general things, but they won't be able to go deep into their history because they've used whatever mechanisms that they've employed, to not go into that place. So I just wanted to point that out because that's something that our viewers could pay attention to. Like if you ever find like, I have a hard time remembering that may be a sign that we have repressed trauma. And again, I want to take the moment at this moment too, to kind of demystify that word or maybe further identify it for people, because people generally think trauma is in the category of the loss of a loved one, like an accident. Divorce certainly would be trauma in someone's life. But so many other things are traumatic. And largely, they are certainly abuses that happen, neglect in our childhood, but not getting our needs met in our home structure, one way or the other. Either because our parents didn't take the time to care about them and just wanted to control us and have us be good kids, even with good intentions, or we never voiced them, or we were traumatized one way or the other. And that is what happened in your case, Melanie. And you weren't about to go to them and tell them, hey, I need this, or I need that. So I just wanted to precede your stories and identifying your trauma for us with that so that people can relate to it, hopefully a little bit differently.
Sure. Do you want to start? Would you like me to start? Or?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Since Bill was just
all right.
about it.
So let me go back and start at the homework that you had given me prior to me and telling you about my drama. I remember we were working on forgiveness, and forgiveness was always a very hard thing for me. I just grew up in a household, in a loving household, but I grew up in a household where forgiveness was not a strength. And first, I had to write down a list of things that I had to forgive others. And that was a fairly easy homework for me compared to when then I had to sit down and journal about what I had to forgive myself. And at the very end of this long list of things that I wanted to work on and forgive myself, I almost mumbled it out to you that I didn't say I was sexually abused as a child. My words were I had sex or like sexual or intimate relation with a specific person. And you were like, hold on a minute, like, and for me, like now looking back, or like when I had shared my story once before, when I talk about it in group, like people that have been sexually abused, rather as a child or as an adult, we don't realize that when that happens, that it was not our choice. Like I was certain, I was 100% convinced that I had made that choice. Why? Because I didn't fight it, right? I didn't necessarily ask for it, but if you don't say no, or if you don't realize that maybe in your very innocent way you do say no, but not in a very clear way, like no. You don't realize that it wasn't your choice, that you didn't ask for it. So for pretty much most of my life, I just thought that I had asked for it. And so it was on the list of forgiving myself versus my abuser. And it was for a very long time, that was one of my biggest struggles, to literally accept and realize like that I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask to be sexually abused as a child. I didn't beg to have intercourse with that person, because there's different levels of sexual abuse, which each of them is dramatic in their very own way. Yeah, and when you then had told me and confirmed multiple times, it wasn't your choice, you were sexually abused. I had a hard time believing you that, I just was like, he doesn't know, like he might think that. And I remember that I would very often even watch documentaries about sexual abuse. I would read articles about it. I would, in the newspaper, you follow it. But not once did I associate my own story to that, because in all these documentaries and all these articles, it was always like someone was sexually abused. But in my brain, it was my own choice. So it took me a while to, even after I told you about it, to realize that it was sexual abuse.
Well, in the beginning, you had a lot of shame. You thought I wouldn't want to talk to you anymore.
Yes. Well, and it was, yeah, it's not that it's funny, but like, I think we had like 5 minutes left, maybe 10 minutes at the most at that session, when I mumbled it out there, because I was like, let me utilize the time I have with him as much as I can, because after me telling him that, he wouldn't want to work with me, because who wants to work with someone like me, or who wants to even be connected to someone like me? And then when I had opened up to you and I told you about it, and when I saw your reaction, I was so confused. It didn't make sense to me. My whole world just, it didn't make sense. Like, you were kind, you were listening, you were reassuring me that it happened to me, that it wasn't my choice. And I wanted to fight you on that almost. I almost didn't want you to accept me, or to still like me, or still love me, I was like, there's no way. And yeah, so.
So that was the beginning.
That was the beginning.
That really kind of took the lid off of everything moving forward. So, and then Tyler, before we kind of continue down that road with Melanie's side of things, I don't remember exactly the timeline, but somewhere along that line, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it might have, what happens a lot of times when this happens is the focus can easily go over to the one who has been traumatized, where the lid is taken off, and now that's exposed. And now we can see like, oh, this has been a problem, and blah, 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 blah. And maybe Tyler, at that point, I don't remember again all the details, but maybe your trauma took a back seat at that point, and maybe there was a large focus on Melanie at that point. But I think what happened is ultimately yours got exposed as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You remember the timeline a little bit better than me. Maybe you can share some of that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when all this was happening, you and I were going through with me similar timeline in terms of forgiveness. So we had done some of the like initial excavating, as you call it, like digging a little bit into your past. And I was making a lot of appeasements for my parents, because you were like, why don't you just tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up? And I had to like take a minute and even think about like, why are you asking? Like, why does it matter almost?
Mm-hmm.
You were annoyed about that question.
Yeah, I was like, what does this even matter? Like, I grew up, whatever, and I love my parents, whatever. And I was making a lot of, you called it appeasements. You're like, okay, well, I know you love them. Everyone loves their parents, but what was it actually like? And I remember this like volcanic eruption, like coming up to here. And I was like, whoa, this is really crazy. And I was like forcing it back down. And you were like, maybe something you can do is start journaling. And that was really what like let the eruption of emotions and like whatever needed to come out, because you said when you put your hands to paper, it slows your thinking down, because our thinking is like a million miles per hour. So you can think a thought and then it's gone and you forgot what you even just thought. But when you have to write out every letter of every word and then you slow it all down, it's like, whoa, and you have to start putting it out. And you said, write a letter to each of your parents that they will never read. Just start writing words and see what happens. And so that was like the most profound part of the whole process, because I just started writing out that what it was like, okay, my parents, basically the only time I remember them even happy is maybe when I was really, really little. But even my earliest memories of them was them fighting like crazy and hating each other, but yet living in the same house. And like full on screaming and cursing matches at the top of their lungs. My bedroom was above the kitchen, and so I could just hear everything. And, there's just a lot of negative energy flowing on a daily basis. And then as a kid, you become very hyper aware of body language and little innuendos. And then so my temperament is sanguine in inclusion. So I want to be included in things like desperately. Melancholy compulsive in control. And then in affection, sanguine compulsive. So because my parents were fighting so much, I didn't get the inclusion needs. I felt really excluded and really unsafe in my own home. And actually, I have this memory of being a really young kid, like maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I had this extreme fear of dying. Like, I would have like these panic attacks as a little kid, like being afraid of decades in the future or whatever, that I'm going to die and like what's going to happen when that happens. And I remember it being so overwhelming as a little kid, and my parents didn't know what to do. And that it gave me trouble sleeping at night. And then my sister was born. She's 3.5 years younger. And even then, they weren't happy and living in the same house and fighting all the time. And so that just became my normal. So I had no comfortable kind of family home. We didn't really have family dinners together even. You know, we were actually talking about this just recently, that a lot of times, even as a pretty young kid, I'd have to just look in the fridge to see if anything was there. My parents had no money, so there usually wasn't. And oftentimes I just made peanut butter and jelly sandwich for dinner because that was the only thing that was there. So it was around the same time that Melanie was undigging her trauma. And for a little while, I kind of thought of it as like, well, mine isn't nearly as bad as hers. And, you know, you said, well, trauma is trauma. What happens to one person may seem like it's infinitely worse than what happened to another, but as a child, you have no reference point. There's no gauge. And even as an adult, there's no gauge of what one is compared to another. It is a traumatic experience that has an effect on you. So we started digging into that, you know, a little deeper and a little deeper. And, you know, once I started realizing that, okay, this situation of growing up wasn't normal, and it was really difficult, that I kept journaling and one thing I did too is I went back and listened to the music that I listened to in like middle school, which was like really hard rock with really, you know, positive, uplifting lyrics. Not really. You know, they were talking about all of their pain and screaming it into the microphone. And, you know, I connected to that because it was kind of like an outlet. So in order to go back to the memories, I listened to some of that music again to try to feel what it was like and what I felt then. And then memories started kind of coming back. Because it's really weird how your psyche designs trauma and just hides it on you to try to protect you from it. And then it bubbles up into weird things. Like, so for me, it bubbled up into massive anger outbursts. When I got older and was a teenager and had a car, if something set me off, I would get in the car, listen to loud music, really, really loud, and drive without any regard for anyone else on the road or myself. And like, you know what? This next corner going 90 or 100 miles an hour, if I don't make it through the corner, it's okay. And I remember like even afterwards thinking like that can't be normal, you know? Because, you know, digging deeper into what it was like in the house, my mom would, because they were fighting so much, my mom became pretty much a total alcoholic. She wanted nothing to do with being around my dad, so she would just leave and go hang out with friends and drink all the time. And a lot of my birthdays, for her to get through being around my dad, she was drunk and then didn't remember what we did for my birthday. And my dad had health problems and he really didn't work a whole lot, which is why we had no money. And what he was doing was spending all the money on drugs in the basement. And then as a, like, I think I was 9 or 10, maybe 11, when I found this substance on a mirror with other things to do it with. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And then, you know, you start learning like, oh, that's why that weird guy comes over every 3 days and goes into the basement and then leaves. Like, great. Now my dad is a drug addict. Awesome. So I had a lot of resentment towards him that I didn't even know was there. And that those anger outbursts were just, I guess, my needs not being met. And the anger outbursts would happen in front of you too in our fights, but never directed at you, thank God. But I would throw my cell phone against the wall. I would punch holes in the wall. I would, you know, just was crazy. The worst one was actually not even like that long ago when we were really digging through the stuff with you, Bill. we got into a really pretty big fight, and I threw a lamp when I was trying to throw it against the wall, and I threw it into my laptop and shattered everything. And that was really the last like major anger outburst, because digging and excavating, it helped like tremendously, and I haven't had that in a long time.
Yeah, Ness, I want to give you a second to pop in a second, but I wanted to, because it's amazing how fast time goes when you start getting into this stuff, and I want to point out, you know, that in light of all of these things coming to the surface,
Mm-hmm.
the initial thing that happens isn't necessarily relief, and everything starts to get better. And this is when I usually tell people it's going to probably get worse for a while before it gets better, because that event that you just talked about was somewhere down the road after you had both started really working on this.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Melanie, you can pick up on that, because
Mhm.
when you started really digging in and Tyler started really digging in, it was like you had to kind of rediscover yourselves as individuals, redefine yourselves basically, and work away from that trauma identification, that trauma triggered lifestyle, if you will. And not only that, but be married together and figure out what's that supposed to look like, because there was a lot of, Melanie, I know for you, you know, working through the issues that follow that kind of abuse in a marriage, in terms of intimacy and so on and so forth. This threw out a whole new set of problems that you had to work together towards solving. Now, when I say to people at the beginning of an onset of something like that, that's actually good news, because, you know, now you can actually work on your genuine selves and your genuine marriage together and build an actual foundation for your marriage moving forward. But you're also standing at the starting line of that, looking at like, yeah, Bill, that looks like really great news. Like, how do we do that? You know, so that's the next leg of the journey, I think. Nesta, do you want to add anything at this point?
No, I think, Bill, what you just said was actually what I was going to ask. I think I relate so much to that. Like, I know when I first started coming to you, we had a pretty heavy session pretty early on with Matt, and you kind of made it very clear to us that, hey, if you're going to, especially in my case, because I had started work a little bit after him, you really exposed how difficult it was going to be to work on myself while also being in a relationship. And that was like a devastating thing for me to hear, like this possibility of like outgrowing someone or all of these things, because you really explained to me that the issues that you're working on yourself are going to be amplified in your relationship. And I didn't really understand that. And it was once I started to go on that journey, I realized how a lot of the stuff that I was dealing with was being carried out in my relationships, probably 10 times worse. So it's this hard balance of figuring out yourself, discovering your own trauma. Tyler, I resonate so much with what you were saying about how so much of my trauma was hidden and I didn't even know it was there. So like, you're trying to uncover this part of yourself while also seeing how that translates into your relationship and having these trigger points. And it can be quite messy and it's overwhelming for sure. I know like you said, Bill, I kind of was like, this is insane. Like, how do I go from here? But that was what I was really going to speak to, is how do you find that balance of working on yourself and discovering those things, working on them, and then having that translate into your relationship.
So Melanie, maybe you can pick up from there on that. And then, you know, maybe we can throw this aspect of when I suggested somebody else in your life.
Yes.
To help. Yeah.
Yes. So, well, first of all, what really started to help us with calming down the storm was just understanding his temperament and my temperament, and then understanding what would trigger me and also what would trigger him. Like, as he said, he would always hear his parents fight, right? And it's not like his parents didn't try to do well, and they were just careless about their kids. But like, then when it came to our match, when he would upset me, I would get so many anger outbursts to like such an extreme that looking back, I'm like, how did you not leave me at that point? And then after I told you, Bill, about the sexual abuse that I had experienced, and then I told Tyler, we were in a car ride, and I was like, all right, let's just get it over with. I looked at him and I was like, oh yeah, by the way, I was, sexually abused when I was around 8 or 9 years old. Thinking, okay, he would drive home, grab my suitcase, say, pack. I don't want to live with someone like you. I don't want to be married to someone like you. So let's go. So none of that happened. So all of a sudden I realized, wow, Bill loves me, even though my husband loves me, even though, and it wasn't even though, scratch even though, it was love me even more. Like me coming out, me working on all my childhood drama, made me realize that they loved me even more. And no matter what they had to do, especially him in the role of a husband, he was willing to do it. And then eventually, Bill, you had recommended me to this amazing woman, Sandy, who is specialized in childhood sexual abuse. And the more I started working with her, the more I realized what my triggers were. Because, for example, sometimes or very often, people that have experienced sexual abuse, they have a very hard time being intimate with their spouses. I didn't have that. And then eventually, because I just suppressed it so much, I knew there was something, but I didn't want to face it, so it just didn't happen, right? If you don't look at it, it's not there. And the more work I did with Sandy, and then also her recommending me to group therapy, the more healing I had experienced. But funny enough, the more I started to heal from the triggers, because also, to back up a tiny bit, once we started what each other's triggers were, we could do our very best to not trigger each other, but still be our true selves, right? You don't want to just not trigger the other person by now not being yourself, but being yourself without triggering the other person. And so the marriage improved, and my healing started to improve, but then I reached a level where all of a sudden intimacy was impossible. And there was a very big mountain within our marriage to climb, because, as you said, in inclusion, he's he's
sanguine compulsive.
He needs it, and I couldn't give him any, like, not even like that sexual intimacy, just any intimacy, right? Intimacy doesn't only have to be like in the bedroom or like sexually. It can be holding hands, kissing. As soon as he would get near me, my brain went into like, oh, he wants something from me. Yeah, so then it was this big mountain that I had to climb. And yesterday I kind of used the example. It felt like climbing the Mount Everest. And then once we got to the top, it wasn't just going down and it was easy. And there was no more struggles. There was no more hard times to face. Like there was another mountain to climb and another one. And we're still climbing mountains, but we now know how to do it. And they got a lot easier, and we do it together. And when he's having a hard time, I say, what can I do? How can I help you? How can I be the best version of myself to help you through what you're dealing with, and vice versa? Yeah.
Tyler, what about your side of that?
Yeah, I mean, very similarly, we realized that we needed to continue, because like you don't go to the gym to get in shape just going 3 or 10 or 25 times. It becomes a lifestyle that you build into your life. So we saw such profound change in our lives that how could we not continue? There's always farther you can go, and your relationship can only improve more and more. So we actually went into business together. We run a small business together. So we're with each other every single day, all the time, and we
And we
enjoy
love it.
We love it. We can't wait to like go take our dog for a walk at the end of the day. And even though we're always together on weekends, it's like, okay, what are we doing? We don't need to get away from each other. We just love being together.
Right. Which we still make sure we each
We have
get.
time balance, yes.
Yes.
But the point is, we enjoy, we just enjoy our lives so much more together. And the kind of person that you were before you knew there was trauma to the person that you become once you get the guidance through it is just, you can't even believe what it used to be like. And you know, everything just comes alive to be who you truly are. And we just wouldn't be able to do it had we not gone through all of that hard work. You know, it sounds hard, but you know, what's your alternative? Like not dealing with something and continuing to fight or be miserable, like that sounds terrible.
Yeah, our alternative would have been us getting divorced, me leaving for going back to Germany, probably never ever talking again, which is not difficult if you live in another country across the ocean. And our life couldn't be any different from the worst case scenario. I mean, we've just we're not perfect, and who knows if we will ever be. I hope not, because if we reach perfect, then we won't thrive to work. I don't think there's such a thing as perfect, but it still feels pretty perfect right now.
Awesome. Well, that's because, like you just said, you know, you remained in the process the entire time, and it really, you know, it's a lifestyle that you engage in one way or the other. You know, you're working at home, you're meeting with people, you're doing everything that it takes, you know, to keep growing and maturing. But there's one more hurdle, I think, Melanie, maybe we could talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Was the fear of having children. And
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
you know, kind of battling through that initial phase, I remember it was quite difficult.
Yes.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I always loved children. I mean, you know, we met while I was an au pair. I was watching kids, and not that my career went down into like that kind of a path, but I've always loved children. And I think one way was because through their eyes, I started to relive my childhood in one way or another way, a childhood that was taken away from me. But unfortunately, even though I started to heal, or a part of me felt like, yeah, I had started the healing process, but I wasn't anywhere close to be healed. And I just developed this fear of having children. I thought that the world is evil, that there's so much abuse out there, whether it's sexual, physical, or emotional. I didn't want to bring an innocent life into this world. And then it took me probably a good half a year, if not more, like 9 months, to really pass through that, get over that fear, and then really started to love the idea of having children. And then once we made that decision, so to say, once we both felt ready for it, we didn't have, we were very, very blessed. He really blessed us, and we were very lucky, very fast. And then all of a sudden I hit another rock bottom, and I was so scared to have a boy. And I was very confused, because like, if you look at the statistic, it seems to be more the girls that experience sexual abuse than the boys. But to fast forward, my fear was that somehow I would not meet my child's needs, and I would pretty much raise an abuser, which is awful to think. Like, this poor child is not even in this world, and my brain already went down that road. And one day I was in tears, and I looked at him and I said, I need to talk to you. And I told him, I was like, I don't know how to tell you, but I'm afraid we're going to have a boy, and that I will be a mess of a mom, and that unfortunately, story will repeat itself in a different way. We're having a boy. And I worked through that. Fear. Honestly, it was a very small mountain to climb. Looking back, it took me a month to really not just be okay with that, but just fall in love with my unborn child. And I always loved him. And I loved the baby and the idea of being pregnant. And it wasn't that. It was the joy was overshadowed by fear. And he just hugged me and he said, it's okay. We're going to get over this mountain. We're going to walk this path together, and it will be fine. And I strongly believe that, yes, we probably won't be the perfect parents, but I really strongly believe that we will provide a pretty good, safe home for him, and hopefully future children. And I feel nothing but joy. But the first few months were, unfortunately, there was a lot of fear involved.
But you went into the fear, you went into the trauma, you went into all the things that were threatening. I always tell people, it's like, if actually it was John Eldridge in Wild at Heart who said, if you have to go into the fear, you have to go into the pain to find the healing, So the healing is always in the pain.
Yeah.
To get rid of the fear, you have to go into the threat. You have to understand what it really is. And like you said, looking back on it, it took you a month, really, just a few sessions, really, and grappling with that and understanding like why it was happening and so on and so forth, so you could move forward in that. It's such a powerful lesson because everything about your story is about going back into the pain.
Yes, 100%.
From the beginning, digging through, and I love the fact that literally every part of the process that we offer people has been used in your life and been activated, and it's done its job.
Right. Yes, no, and it's not like therapy or the process will just delete your past, right? Your past is your past. You cannot rewrite your past, but you can rewrite your future. And that's my favorite part. Like, I rewrote our history. I rewrote us getting divorced. I rewrote us me not being mom. I rewrote me now being pregnant and being fearful of being a mom. And I'm just happy and in love and enjoy it. And I'm looking forward to other mountains to climb because I know I have the right tools and I have a very, very great future ahead of us because of the work, because of the process, and because of you guys.
Yeah, the resource of having you and EIS and everyone involved, there's no way that you could do it by yourself. You have to really dive into it and absolutely build, like going into the fear, going into the obstacle, like, because that is the way that you need to go to learn from, gain perspective, and kind of break through. It's when you run away from, it's like trying to run away from a disease. It's within you. You can't run from it. You have to literally go into it and like destroy it. So thank you for all the work that you've done with us through the years, because well,
you make it all worthwhile. This just made it all worthwhile. Like, you have no idea, because we've journeyed obviously together the whole time. And I was just thinking back on the other times that you've shared, when you were kind of midway in the process and just kind of walking through it, and it was still kind of all over the place, and you were just still getting your feet wet, but being bold enough and courageous enough to get out there and share, midstream and be vulnerable like that is just so impactful for people. So before we finish up, the answer may be obvious, like you've just said it, but what do you advise, like, people who are looking in and they're going to be watching this video later on Facebook and YouTube and stuff? And then Ness, you can kind of give me some closing remarks. Then I'm going to go through some usual shameless plugs for books and stuff like that. But what do you have to what do you have to share with people who are watching? Because I mean, all the comments that you saw me put up, obviously people are being impacted and I hope challenged by the things that you're saying. But what do you suggest that they do? I think it's easy to say, hey, go get help, go to EIS, go get help or do something, you know. But helping people to take that initial step within themselves, what would you say to those folks that are watching right now?
Well, for me personally, I would say don't compare your own drama to our drama or anyone else's drama. Your story is worth, your past is worth to be healed. You're worth to be healed and to experience the healing. And never underestimate your own story. Because as I said in the very beginning, I would watch documentaries, would read articles, but I would never relate to them because, in my opinion, their story was way worse than mine. And I had just blocked my own healing by comparing. And no one's story can ever be compared, no matter what. And I am beyond grateful for all the work we've done. And luckily for us, not continuing within the process just was never an option. We were just very blessed on that end, that it was never an option for us to just stop. And I would never be in life where I am now, not so much in success, just like within happiness and just feeling free and free of shame. If I wouldn't have started the process and B, continued, and C, be willing to continue.
Yeah, that's good. I would say definitely don't hesitate, but be patient. So don't hesitate to find the person that can help you through this. Don't hesitate to book another session. Don't hesitate to continue on, but also be patient that the process is going to take time and it's going to be difficult. So, you know, when you hear a story, all in all, it's like, oh my God, this is crazy. How am I ever going to get through all of that? And it's like this epic thing that you're going to have to undertake. But when you do it, you know, one little piece at a time, 1 hour at a time, one session at a time, you know, don't hesitate, just do that hour, but be patient because it'll take a lot of those and it's okay. But when you start to come out the other side, you'll almost not even understand what just happened, but you'll look back and like, holy smokes, what was I like a year ago? And you won't even recognize yourself. And then you'll start to be able to impact other people and do fun, great, exciting things with your life and live life to its fullest. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Wow. Ness, final thoughts?
I'm just feeling all the feels. Thank you guys so much for sharing your heart and being vulnerable. I know for me, I feel inspired to just dig even deeper in the process because of your story. And I'm just so grateful that I got to hear from you. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the conversation, and congratulations again. I just feel your guys' like peace and love through the screen. And it's amazing to just see what EI Solutions has done in people's lives.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for easily one of the best shows we've ever had. I can tell you that for sure. I'm not just saying that to make you feel better, but because it has just been so powerful. And I know the impact is really far reaching. So now it's time for the shameless plug. So it's time for me to put up the book. This is available on Amazon.com right now in paperback, in Audible and Kindle, and on my blog post at bill-hoffman.com in Spanish. If you have any Spanish friends that you'd like to pick one up for, and it's PDF on that one. It's an ebook. You can get it downloaded right away. And then also one of our EIS counselors, Marie Lawson. I know this is looking a little funky on the screen there. She wrote this book called No More Anxiety. And it's a guide to identifying and overcoming anxiety. It's really, I know you can't see it, but I'll open up like you can. It's a journal formatted book. which is really awesome. And she really hits even the most practical things like diet that you need to pay attention to in your life if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety and fear in your life. So you can pick that up as well. And you can also, when you go to billhoffman.com, bill-hoffman.com, you can subscribe for my daily blog post. And if you've been watching it all or paying attention to that, getting those emails, you're starting to see that our other counselors are really starting to put a lot of their posts up in there. So there's a real great range of stuff that's being put up there. You're not just hearing from me anymore. So we're really excited about that as we keep growing. And yeah, this has been the best. So thank you guys so much. Speaking of Marie Lawson, next week, she's going to be my guest.
Oh, cool.
So tune in. We're going to start having our EIS counselors on so you can get to know them too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Love you all. We'll talk soon. For now, it's EIS out. Bye.